Hi, everyone. This is Preparing Secondary Applications to Medical Schools webinar. Thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. I know on the East Coast it's 8 p.m. and the West Coast is 5 p.m. And I just want to thank you guys for joining us. So my name is Janet. I work for My HCN, the My Health Career Navigator. It's an online resource that supports pre-medical students, public health, if you're interested in public health, if you're a young professional interested in the healthcare field, we're here to provide you with information, information to jobs, internships, and webinars such as these for you guys. So thank you guys for coming. Tonight we have two panelists, and I just want to thank both of them again for dedicating their time to doing this. They're both medical students. So first we have Hayden Hatch. He's a third-year MD PhD student at Albert Einstein College of Medicine in the Bronx, New York. Hi, Hayden.
Hi, thanks for having me.
And our second panelist tonight is Alfonso Molina. He's a third-year medical student and also a Health Career Connection alumni at the UCLA College of Medicine. Thank you, Alfonso.
Hi, it's great to be here.
Yeah. All right. So for our Q&A session, so this will be after both gentlemen will give their presentations on secondary application, and so if you have a question, please enter them in the chat box below, and after we're done with their presentations, I'll read out a few of them, and if you'd like to directly ask either Hayden or Alfonso a question, please indicate that on your question. So without further ado, let me share my screen. Please let me know if you see, so you should see the PowerPoint presentation. Let's see, a moment. So Hayden, do you see your PowerPoint?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so yeah, so without further ado, let's get started.
Hi, thanks for the introduction, Janet, and thanks for My Health Career Navigator for hosting me. I'm happy to speak to everyone about the process of preparing your secondary applications to medical school. I have a few slides that I, sort of put together based on, my experience, but of course everyone's experience is different, and it depends on which schools you apply to, and things like that. So hopefully you can, take something away from this presentation, and it's not a bore to some of you. But yeah, so I guess we can get started then. Okay, so I included this here because I just wanted to show you. I wanted to acknowledge the fact that this whole process is can take multiple years, and it's a long process, and you've worked so hard to get to where you are now. And I guess right now, or I guess there are multiple audiences here. The first, you might be preparing to apply. You may be finishing up classes or studying for the MCAT, or maybe even you've taken the MCAT and are getting ready to apply. But there's probably a group of you who are maybe well into the secondary application process. So hopefully I can provide some insight into both audiences here. So I guess you can click next, Janet. So yeah, I just wanted to highlight that this is a long process, and we're sort of like honing into this one small part. I guess in reality, this application submission for the secondary, this process, maybe extends into from July until mid-October or mid-December. But in this map here, in this schedule here, it only highlights 2 months, and I can I'll explain why in a second, why it's only highlighting those 2 months rather than all the way until December. Yeah, so I just wanted to, I guess, put this slide first before I even get into any specifics. We all know self-care is important, and this is something you should really, focus on and prioritize as you're filling out your secondary applications, or even studying for MCAT, or before you even do that, senior year of college as you're doing your classes. So these are just a few meditation apps. You can download them for iPhone. I thought it was, I use some of them every now and then. Stay active, stay healthy, make time for friends, family, and fun. Don't let this application process get you down, and if possible, avoid stressors. So everyone around you is probably talking about applying for med school, or maybe bugging you about where you are in the process, or sharing scores. Don't let that get you down. Everyone's application, everyone's process is very different. Everyone has different variables to their application, so just try not to let that get you down. And I also wanted to highlight the Student Doctor Network, which is it can be very useful when it comes to trying to figure out when your secondary applications are going to be sent to you. If you are competitive for a certain school, but it can also be a major stressor, and it can actually bring you down, get you depressed, and just keep that in mind as you're going through these forums on the Student Doctor Network. But I also want to say it's a very useful resource, and to make the most of it if you can. Okay, so I just wanted to start out with something I call myth versus fact. You can probably guess what that is. And then I wanted to follow up with just a very, very, very brief overview of the secondary application. Most of you are probably aware of it, of what it is, what it entails. Some tips and tricks. So things that are strategies that I found very useful as I was applying, and some useful resources, some useful websites that I wanted to put out there. Okay, so I guess you can click the first button. Okay, so most schools screen applications before sending secondaries. So since there's no way to communicate with the attendees here, I'll just say that or is there a chat room people can enter?
Yeah,
if you want to.
Yeah.
If you want to, you can write something in the chat room, but it's not necessary. Do people think that this is a myth or a fact? It's not super important, but okay. So I can just say that it's I would characterize this as a myth. Most schools most schools actually do not screen secondary applications applications before sending out secondaries. And some people think there's an equation, there's meaning behind all this. They might multiply your MCAT score by your GPA, and if you are above like a certain cutoff, then they send you the secondary, and if not, then they don't send you a secondary. This is completely myth, unless I guess it does apply to a few schools, mainly certain California schools, but the majority of medical schools, they actually don't do this. Almost everyone gets a secondary application. So we can go on to the next one. Okay, all schools require a secondary. This is actually a myth. So most schools actually require a secondary. There are a handful of, for example, I know there's certain schools in Texas that don't require a secondary at all. And there's, the school that I'm at, actually, Albert Einstein, which is located in New York City. There is a secondary, but that secondary is really, just a series of yes or no questions. There's no real essay you have to write. So there are many schools that actually don't require a comprehensive essay. You must submit a secondary within 2 weeks of receiving it. So, so many schools give you, say, I was looking through some of the deadlines of certain schools, and some of them, are in mid-December or mid-November, for example. It's suggested that you submit within 2 weeks of receiving your secondary application. And I know this is something that's, a lot of advisors tell you to do, but say you aren't, done with your writing at the end of 2 weeks, it's okay to take a third week, for example, or even a fourth week. I think the quality of your application is more important than the time. So, some of this is rolling, some of this is not rolling. So it's really worth, taking all the time you need to actually finish your secondary and getting it proofread and edited before you actually submit it. All secondaries require application fees. This, of course, is a myth. There's a federal assistance program that I think AMCAS offers. There's certain, a lot of schools offer, waivers for secondary application fees. So if that's something that's, preventing you from applying to, certain schools that you would otherwise, want to go to, I would, just write the office an email, maybe explain your situation, and they might even waive the application fee. The next one is the more schools I apply to, the more essays I have to write, sad face. So this is actually isn't, this is not necessarily true. It could be true, but it's not necessarily true, and this is something that I'm going to talk about on, the following slides. It is best not to apply to school X since I am below the MSAR cutoff. So MSAR actually stands for a medical school admissions requirement, and there's a website that I'm going to link to at the end of this presentation. But basically, this is just a website that says, the median MCAT score or GPA of most of applicants that actually matriculate into or accepted and matriculate into the school. And a lot of students actually use those numbers as cutoff as to if they should apply to a school or not. I would characterize this as a myth. It really depends who you ask. Certain pre-med advisors, as you might be aware of, encourage you not to apply to certain schools if you're below certain, ranges. But I would actually encourage you to apply, even if you're below, the GPA and or the MCAT score on there, because there are many other aspects of an application, and it might be worth your while to actually apply to some of these schools. And this is the last one on the slide, but I have no chance of getting into school X since student Z on SDN, the Student Doctor Network, scored higher on the MCAT than me or had a higher GPA and was rejected. So this is another thing I was highlighting when I was talking about Student Doctor Network. A lot of students go to that to sort of compare grades or try to assess their likelihood of getting into a school. Again, I wouldn't, let that, get you down or prevent you from applying, since again, most of the people who actually post on this forum are ones that, actually, got an acceptance or, move further on in the process. So I wouldn't, it's a very biased sample, so I would take whatever you see on that website with a grain of salt. Okay, so this is my brief, I guess, introduction to the secondary application. So these are just a couple websites which, just summarize the purpose, the goal of the secondary applications and why schools find this useful. If we go on to the next point, here I would just summarize this as it's just a series of of essay questions. It can range from 1 to I've seen applications that might have 7 or 8 essays even, and it really depends if you're applying to an MD PhD or an MD program, but there are many essays, and this is an opportunity for you to further differentiate yourself, because many applications they spend this application or I guess medical school admissions directors spend a certain amount of time on all the applications, and you really want yourself to stand out, and these secondary applications actually help you in that process. So just in terms of the timeline, this is something I was mentioning in the myth versus fact section. So when will school X send me a secondary application? And that's typically 1 to 2 weeks after your primary application has been verified. So for those who are still in school and haven't really started the process of applying, basically there's a primary and a secondary application. And the primary application is, it's a thing that, contains all your grades for your classes and, your MCAT score and your GPA and, your main personal statement, which is, at the core of your primary applications. And then when you're done with that, it also contains some letters of recommendation. When you're done with that, that actually gets sent to the schools, and the schools actually see that application. But before the schools see that application, it has to be verified. So they actually compare your grades that appear that you manually entered on your primary application with the grades on your transcript, and that can take anywhere, from 4 to 6 weeks. It's a really long time. which is why people encourage you to submit the primary early on so you can, get ahead of the crowd pretty much. And so after those 4 to 6 weeks, a school will take 1 to 2 weeks, to send out that secondary application. So this, from the time it takes, the time it takes for you to hit submit to receiving your secondary application, that can take, 5 to, say 7 weeks, or sorry, 8 weeks. So it's a really long process, and you shouldn't, be intimidated by that. And then when should I submit an application to a school? As I said, ideally, within 2 weeks, and that's what most counselors will tell you. But realistically, if at the end of the 2 weeks you don't have, something that you're proud of that you can submit to a school, I would just take that extra week, or those extra, that extra week and a half to, really write something of quality. But if you can, really try to get that in as fast as you can. And the more essays you have written, the faster the turnaround. And the question is why, and that's something I'm going to talk about in the next slide. Okay, so you actually don't need to wait for a secondary before writing the essays, and this is, something that many people don't realize. In addition to Student Doctor Network, I know there's a forum on there that actually, as soon as people start receiving secondary applications, they post it on the Student Doctor Network, so other students can actually see these essays. This website here is actually a prompts database, so every year, I don't know who does this, but every year people actually update the essays on this prompts database so people can get a head start on their essay writing. Actually, the essays don't change from year to year that much, so you can pretty much assume that the essay will be, similar in the same. It would be the same number of essays. You may not even need to write a new essay. You can have several. I used to call them skeleton essays because they're the bare bones of an essay. So as I'm going to be talking about in the following couple of slides, you can actually have an essay for one school that you can also submit to another school because the prompts are very similar between schools. So here's an example. So I just got these these prompts from some of the school or secondaries from the prompts database. So for example, this is one of Duke's questions. So they're just asking you to describe, a very difficult obstacle that you have faced and, how you overcame it. In Johns Hopkins, they wanted you to describe a situation where you had to overcome adversity and, include lessons learned and, how will this affect your path as a physician. And then Stony Brook is simply describing an obstacle you've overcome and how it's defined you. And then Pritzker, or the University of Chicago, they want you to talk about a challenging situation. So you can see that many of these essay prompts are very similar. So this is something that I did, and I think if you ask any current med school student, this is what they would tell you as well. You can actually use the same essay for different schools. Well, not the same essay, but you'd have to change, the school name and certain aspects of the essay. But as I said, you can have maybe a skeleton essay or, something that has the bare bones. And, I realize that, many schools have different word counts. So as you, cut and paste or take away things, you can achieve the desired word counts. So I think this is a skill that that might take some time to master, but it will save you a lot of time in the long run. And so those were some easy examples. So this for some examples that might be more difficult is one of Columbia's is what challenges do you expect to arise living and working in a complex urban environment, and how will you meet them? So that's not something you see too often. And then University of Pennsylvania, this is an example. Please explain your reasons. It's very, cut and dry. Please explain your reasons for applying to our school. Rutgers, this is one that I love. If your legal residence is not in New Jersey, please discuss specific reasons. So basically asking why you want to move to New Jersey. That's what they're sort of asking. And then University of Chicago again, they basically want to see that you understand what their mission statement is and how you would enhance diversity at Pritzker. So you can see that these essays, it might be more difficult to apply them to other formats, and that's okay. This is, a tedious process, but you're going to be satisfied once you finish this. But for example, you could probably combine Columbia and Rutgers on this slide. So New Jersey and New York, they're both urban environments, so you could probably combine those. But I guess as you're, for example, for UPenn, just you can just try to be original in that and try to throw things in that sort of help describe yourself or your personality. Okay, so and here's just some final tips and tricks that I wanted to sort of emphasize, just throw out there that I found useful. Alphonse is going to be talking to you right after me, and he might say that some of these are not useful, but this is just again my perspective and what helped me as I was writing essays. So yeah, do your research before applying. Of course, I know that seems like a very obvious thing, but there are a lot of students or people out there who actually say I might apply to this school just because it just adds another it increases my likelihood of getting into some school, right? And in that process they might lose the originality they would throw into an essay or their application, and make their application a little more vague to sort of accommodate that strategy. But I guess just make sure you're aware of what the certain unique aspects of these schools, and try to sort of put like a twist on those essays to sort of show your personality and your accomplishments and how you would add to their school. Next one is ask yourself, what can I write that others will not write about? And this is something that I really thought about it during every single essay I wrote, even for cut and dry prompts. So things like the UPenn's essay question about just describe why you applied to UPenn. Just always try to throw something in about yourself. Write smart, not hard, and this is sort of what I've been going on and on about. Just you don't have to write a new essay for every essay prompt, as you can just have a collection of essays. Just stay organized, and this process will become easy as you go through it. Easier as you go through it. Answer all parts of the question. There's some schools, and I've actually heard this from certain admissions directors during some of my interviews, where they really want applicants to answer all parts of the question, and not answering a certain subpart or a certain part might actually hurt your application. So just make sure you answer all parts of the question, and make sure that you actually don't spend your secondary application repeating what you said in your primary application. That's unless indicated. That's something that that a lot of schools do not like. And I guess I just mentioned this, but don't repeat your personal statement unless indicated. So there's actually, I forget which essay this was, but one school actually asked you to repeat something in your primary application and to elaborate on it. So some schools might do that, some may not. And just emphasizing this proofread, proofread, proofread. You might, be applying to UPenn and, talk about Irvine, for example, and or mention, Irvine in your application. Just try to avoid this, because this is something that might hurt you. As soon as you press submit, you might realize that there's, a typo or another school name in your essay. Stay organized, have a schedule. So the next slide actually will show you an example of a schedule you might want to consider. And proofread again. I just wanted to throw that in there. So this is an example of a way to stay organized. This is very similar to something that I use. I was actually going to take a snapshot of the Excel spreadsheet that I use, but I had a notes section in there and it contained some vulgar language, so I decided not to do that. But basically, you can just have a list like this, say all the schools, basically say the dates when they're due, and just a sample of what the essay prompt is. I would also add, what I included in my spreadsheet was, include username or passwords to certain website or the applications. You can even have a notes section, so you might say like 7 essays, and you might want to save that to last, or you might want to start that earlier on. I guess I neglected to mention this at the beginning, but I actually applied to, I think, more schools than the average person, and I don't want to scare you, which is why I didn't mention this earlier on. I actually paid to apply to 32 MD PhD programs, which is a lot. I actually submitted, out of those 32 schools that I paid for, actually submitted 25 applications successfully. And out of those 25 applications I submitted, I ended up getting 6 interviews. So that's about a quarter, yield. And then I got into Einstein, and I basically told the other schools that I was no longer interested. I also used my credit card to pay for the application fees, so that was 1% cash back. So you might find that useful. So that was basically my story. So if you just go on to the next, sorry.
I don't know. Did you find because you're applying to like an MD PhD program? Did you find the process a little different? I guess maybe in terms of your focus, as far as like researching for different programs, it's a little different.
Yeah. So great question. I bet some of the people or some of the students in the chat room might be asking why I'm one of the panelists as an MD PhD applicant. I didn't go through the MD process, but I did go through the MD process. Basically, the MD PhD application is basically the MD application plus additional essay questions about your research. And you might have to, ask for a couple more letters of recommendation that apply to, whatever research you were involved in, undergrad, or if you took some gap years after undergrad, they might want some letters of recommendation. But it's all the same thing. I applied via AMCAS. I filled out the same secondary essays, but I just had a couple of additional essays. And the reason why I applied to so many is I just had certain mentors who encouraged me to apply, and I was afraid, and I just applied to a lot. So that's something that I wouldn't want you to emulate. I would just say be confident and apply to whatever number you think is appropriate, and within your financial your range. And yeah, as I said, here are some resources. I mentioned many of these, but I guess I included school-specific tips. These, if you click on or if you copy down that link for school-specific tips, this website actually tells you some tips for completing the secondary application for certain schools. And then that's the MSAR and prompts database that I mentioned. And the AAMC, they actually have great tips that are very useful. So that's the end of my part of the presentation. I'm going to stick around for Alfonso's presentation, and if you have any questions that are specific to what I talked about, feel free to ask me, but I'll stick around.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Hayden. That was really great.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. So Alfonso?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to, if you could share about how you, what was your experience applying and some of your tips, what you got out of specifically the secondary application process, that would be great.
Yeah, of course. First of all, Hayden, that was a great presentation. I think you did a great job summarizing, the high yield points into the secondary applications, and I'm impressed that you remembered so much about it. It seems like such a long time ago.
Yeah.
But in terms of my experience, so I applied to, I believe, 20 schools initially, and then I got, I think, 17 secondary applications back, and then ended up submitting, I think, 15 or maybe even all of them. I can't remember exactly. But but yeah, like Hayden was talking about, the process can be very demanding, especially if you apply to so many schools, because the secondaries are coming in, if not every day, at least multiple times per week. And so it can get overwhelming. So I definitely like the organization part that Hayden was talking about. I think it's very important to stay organized during this process. Another thing that I found helpful when I was doing my secondaries was to just keep a journal with me at all times. You'll find that you guys are probably doing the secondaries right now, so you'll see that you guys are probably thinking about it all the time. When I was writing my secondaries, I remember just reflecting on my life and trying to see what I could say to best answer the questions that were asked on these secondaries. And sometimes, the ideas just don't come to you right away. So what I would do is just take a break. I try to go like outdoors, go on a hike, and just keep a journal with me, and just think about the question and think about things that I've experienced in my life, and then write it down. Or I'd be, driving somewhere, and then I just think about an idea that I want to explore or expand upon that I had already talked about in a previous essay, and then I, take out my cell phone and kind of make a voice note to remind me of what I was thinking of at that time. And I think that really, really helped, especially once I got stuck on certain prompts.
Yeah. Alfonso, maybe can you a little like I think the audio is just a little. It was kind of getting scratchy. I think the audio is better now. Thanks.
Okay. Sorry about that.
It's okay.
I guess just to summarize what I just said, for those that didn't hear, basically just I think it's helpful to stay organized, like Hayden was saying. I think it's important to keep a journal with you at all times, just because you might think of an idea that comes to you, and it's important to write that down to later explore it, and just take breaks during your writing process. And then in terms of the actual essay writing, I think that it was really important to use examples when writing the essays. It seems like very obvious, but it can get a little, like when you're in the writing process, it can be easy to forget these like simple writing methods. So instead of saying like I'm a responsible person, describe a scenario where you like were not in a situation and it demonstrates that you were responsible. I think that goes a long way when reading these essays. I've sat on the admissions committee here at UCLA, and I think that's what sticks with me the most, because afterwards after reading an application, we essentially like advocate for the patient, for the not the patient, for the student, on their behalf, and it's very useful when the student writes examples that can kind of make it easy for us to portray who they are and why they deserve to have a spot in the medical school. And then lastly, I think just to emphasize, like all of this hard work that you're doing right now, it pays off in the next step of the medical school application process. The next step would be the interview, and all of this reflection and writing day after day, it really helps to hone in on who you are as a person. And once you get into the interview, you kind of have thought about your life so much. I think a lot of us don't really focus on on ourselves and all the things that we've done. We kind of just do things out of the goodness of our hearts. So when we actually like have these couple of months to just think about what we've done and who we are, once you go to the interview, it's very natural to just speak about who you are to somebody that's interviewing you. So just keep that in mind when you're in the writing process.
Yeah, thank you so much, Alfonso. I really like that point about using examples and the fact that, the hard work that you do put into your essays really do like lay a foundation in terms of preparing for interviews and just like bringing your whole self forward, when you do get to, meet the admissions committee. So thank you so much, Alfonso.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So again, I just want to thank you, Hayden and Alfonso, so much for volunteering your time to this. I think that, I think I definitely got, as someone who's also applying to medical school, I really got a lot out of it. And for me, I think one thing I got out of just not to be so, I think, organized, and you don't really have to. It doesn't have to be an intimidating process. It could actually be a fun process if you follow the rules, and you just you know what to expect, and you prepare beforehand.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
Yeah, thanks so much. So okay, so I'm gonna give you guys 1 minute to send in your questions. I do have a couple of questions already, so I'm just gonna bring these forward. Um, let's see. But if you can, please submit your questions to the chat box. Okay, so this one question is from Chinya, and she asks, this is a practical question. So when is it too late to add a school? So I'm guessing she's thinking in terms of just to medical school. And when is it? What do you guys think? When is it too late to add a school
Uh,
in terms of the timeline?
so I can answer that if that's all
Mm-hmm.
right.
Yeah.
So I had that timeline,
Yes.
my
I'll
first
go
slide in my
back.
presentation.
Yeah. I'll share right now.
Okay. So you can see, so basically, I guess the pink box for the MCAS primary, it says May, so May to July, sorry, May to end of June, sorry. That's when you're really, working on your primary. And I should also add, so MCAS actually opens up the primary. I'm forgetting what the date is. It might be different this year, but basically they open up the application so you can get started on entering information, and then you can actually submit. I think they open up in May or something. Correct me if I'm wrong, but they open up in May, for example, and then you can submit your application sometime in June, right? So you have that whole month, where no one's submitting the primary. Everyone's just working on it. And then you submit the primary, and then it's validated, right? It takes 4 to 6 weeks to get validated. During that time, or even as you're, submitting secondaries, you can go back to the primary, even after it's verified. You can go back to the primary and actually add a school. And as soon as you add a school, now that your application is verified, as soon as you add a school, within, I think, a couple days, AMCAS will actually send your primary application to that additional school. So you can actually, add schools any time during, during the application process. I think as long as the deadline has not passed to submit the secondary to that school. So
Right.
I think the point of, before submitting your primary, the point of including all the schools that you're applying to. So the reason why, I put, 32 different MD PhDs on there was because I wanted the secondaries as soon as possible, so I could start, putting down information. And I ended up, out of those 32, I ended up applying to 25 of those, right?
Mhm.
So I guess in a sense, I wasted some money by, not submitting all 32. But, after a while, you're overly ambitious. I think this applies to anything. You're overly ambitious at the beginning of, any process, and then it sort of wears on you, and then so just sort of be realistic. And I think the same thing happened to Alfonso. He said he paid for a certain amount of secondaries, but he only applied to, fewer than that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so I think this happens to everyone, but I just ideally you would include whatever schools you wanted to when you submit your primary, but you can always add other schools on.
Great. Uh, Let me go back to the chat box. Again, please feel free to send in your questions. Oh, and Chinya says thank you, Hayden.
Oh, no problem.
Yeah. Uh, okay. So another question is, what did you guys do when you got stuck on an essay question? If you did get stuck when writing.
Yeah, I can answer that question.
Yeah.
I definitely got stuck on a lot of the prompts. I think that writer's block, especially since we're writing so much during the process, happens. And so what I would do is just take a break. I would go either like I really like to just drive around. Not so much here in LA because there's so much traffic, but back home I'm from the Bay Area, and so there was less traffic at the time. So I would like to just kind of go on a drive and just think, um, either think about the question or just like not even think about it at all and just listen to music and then come back to it. I'd also go on hikes and take a journal with me and just jot down ideas as they came. So I think that was very helpful for me.
Yeah, I definitely agree with 100% of what you said, Alfonso, and I just wanted to add on to that. There's certain, there, in addition to, taking breaks, um, there are many, skill or strategies you can do as you're writing. So, I was actually taught this by, one of my high school Latin teachers, but during every, major essay I'm writing, I would have a separate document, or, at the end of that document, I would have a separate document which I would call a poop page, but a lot of people, call it something different. But basically, like if I write something that doesn't make sense, or if I write something that I no longer want to include in that specific essay, I wouldn't delete it. I would just, take it and place it on the poop page. So basically, it's just droppings of, of ramblings or droppings of, things that I wouldn't necessarily use for this essay, but I might use for another. And, I might use like words that I was like, oh, I didn't even know that this word was in my vocabulary, and I would look it up and use that word in a different essay. So I think just a combination of doing things that you find de-stressing, as Alfonso said, and using other tactics like not spending a whole day on like writing one essay, just taking breaks and going between different essays. I think that's something that would definitely help that.
Right. Thanks, Hayden. And do you guys have any tips as far as like the budgeting your secondary applications? I know, Hayden, you mentioned that you use a credit card, and that 1% cashback does definitely add up. But do you have any suggestions, any more, I guess, as far as like how you handled the finances?
That's a great question, and something that I guess really neglected to fully address. But so everyone's finance situation is very different, and
Mhm.
schools acknowledge this, right? And so that's why every year schools, I think every single school, almost every single school has this, but they have assistance programs where they can waive application fees, right? There's the federal assistance program, which you can apply for, I think, before you submit. There's a deadline, so just, I guess, Google federal assistance program. But basically what that is AMCAS waives the application fees for, I'm forgetting the exact number, but it's something like 10 to 12 or maybe even more schools. So
Mhm.
that's, right off the bat, that's like 10 or 12 schools that are free to apply to, right? If you don't qualify for that, there's certain schools offer their own assistance programs. I mean, everything in this during this, this 3-year process, everything is about, communication. Communication is key. So by all means, don't be afraid to send an email or call an admissions director. I know that people on SDN, there are certain forums that are like, don't call this school because they, get annoyed when you just I think everyone's their own person, and schools understand that people have questions, and everyone's finances are different. So if you have questions about things like that, just feel free to call up the school. I was also sort of, I guess, like a non-traditional student in that sense. I was actually working as I had graduated in 2012 from Harvey Med College in California, and afterwards I started as a research technician because I wasn't sure if I wanted to do, a PhD, or if I wanted to do an MD with, intensive research, or if I wanted to do an MD PhD program. And I eventually decided during this research technician thing I did at NYU that that I was interested in research. So I actually used some of the money I made during that job to apply to schools. But everyone's different. Everyone's financial situation is different, and you might want to seek advice from friends, family, or college counselors about that.
Great. Jacqueline submitted this question. How did you divvy up people to review your secondaries? Who did you use to have them reviewed? And she also says she doesn't want to overwhelm people. So can you guys, Alfonso, Hayden, can you share your experiences with that in terms of asking people to look over your secondaries?
Yeah, I can share my experience with that. I think I had a pretty extensive list of people that I asked to review my secondaries. So I think the first people that I reached out to were my friends that I knew were either English majors in college, or just had better grammar than I did, and that I knew. So those were definitely the first contacts. And then I just had like an open conversation with them. I told them the process, and that I was gonna need their help, and I would really appreciate it if they could take a look at these essays, because they were very time sensitive, and they were really important to actually getting into medical school. And I think most of them were very understanding of that, and understood the time sensitivity to them. But I understand where you're coming from, because yeah, you can get there's a lot of essays to read, and it's time that they're taking out of their day. So I try to kind of divvy it up. I also reached out to old professors at my undergrad. I contacted my old English professors, and I explained to them what I was doing and applying to medical school, and if they would please take the time to read like one application. And then as Hayden was mentioning, you kind of reuse a lot of the essays, or tweak them in certain in like minor ways to fit other applications. And so I would give them an application that had a very a good amount of essays, so that multiple essays were being reviewed, and then I could use those for other applications. So friends, undergrad professors. I even went all the way to high school, to my English professors in high school, and I went back, and then I think teachers are always kind of excited to see their old students. So I went back to my high school, and then I again explained to them I was applying to medical school, and if they could please take some time to review this essay, and they were very willing to help. And then there was even a point where, because I didn't want to ask the same people over and over, so I even sent an email to a local community college in my neighborhood.
Wow.
And I contacted their academic affairs or student affairs office, and then explained the situation, and they actually reviewed one of my secondaries at that time as well. So I kind of just reached out to people. It's very uncomfortable sometimes, but I really wanted this, and sometimes you have to kind of go out of your way to to ask for help.
Hmm. Swallow your pride, I guess. And
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, yeah. Well, thank you so. Hayden, did you have anything further to add to this point? That point?
No, I think that was a very eloquent response. That's exactly what I did. I don't really have much to add. I went to my friends, found I didn't, just load all my essays on one person.
Mm-hmm.
I sort of had a batch of people who, or you could even ask on Facebook, social media, is there anyone who can, just proofread my essays? I'm really committed to applying to medical schools, and this would help me a lot. You can even offer to buy them a coffee if you don't know them that well.
Hmm. Yeah.
But or like just meet me at this cafe or something. But I spent a lot of time in cafes too,
Yeah.
because growing up in New York City, that I needed that ambient noise as I was writing. So
Mm.
that's something that I did. But yeah, I guess just have a bunch of people, and then have them proofread, one or two essays.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah, I definitely see both of you guys really just went out of your way to just get, you know, the most help possible, which I think, just going back to just, you know, I think your Hayden's point about just staying calm and like, trying to be in a healthy space while you're doing your job is definitely an important aspect of it. You don't have to do everything by yourself, and I think that's really important.
Right, and just one quick point adding on to
Mhm.
that, I think the whole application process is, in a way, I guess, a test or like an exam,
Mhm.
because I mean, a lot of this, multitasking or intensive writing, these are things you're going to be doing in medical school, not necessarily the writing part, but you might have like, 3 or 4 tests within this or finals within the span of 2 days or something, or
Mhm.
you might have to go into the clinic, on one day and then take a shelf, which is an exam the next day, and they want to see that you're taking advantage of all the resources around you to accomplish certain tasks. So I think it's one way that it's subtle way of testing you.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a great point to end on. So, thank you guys, to the attendees. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Please, thank you, Hayden and Alfonso, for this great informative webinar. I certainly learned a lot, and I think just going forward, definitely just, we've done the hard work, and the secondary application is just another part, and, just, do the best, I just really thank you, Hayden and Alfonso, for the great tips. Uh, if you please fill out the post webinar survey, and yeah, any last words, Hayden, Alfonso?
I just wanted to say, I think the last slide of my presentation, it had my email address on it. But if
Okay,
there's any way, I would definitely welcome any questions after this, be it a year from now or several months from now. If you have any questions, just feel free to shoot me an email, and I would be glad to answer. Or even if you want me to proofread an essay for you, I guess within reason, don't send me like 30 essays,
uh,
but I would be glad to, proofread an essay or help you in any aspect too. So it's right there. Um, or you can even include, Janet, you can even include my email or
yeah,
Alfonso's email address too, like in the comments after this.
right.
I think we would both be willing to answer any post-webinar questions.
Thank you, Hayden. Alfonso,
Yeah.
any last words?
No, yeah, I just wanted to say thanks for having me on this webinar, and I really hope that I was able to at least help a little bit um, during this application process. I know that it can be very intense, and I just want to congratulate you all because you decided to embark on a journey that's not easy, and so I just want to say congratulations and motivate you to continue pursuing it. I'm going to include my email address. It says to send a message here, so hopefully
Yeah.
it goes out. And if you guys have any questions at any time during the process, please don't hesitate to contact me.
All right. Thank you so much, Alfonso. And yep, you could definitely grab the emails on the chat box. And yeah, I'll give you guys a second to grab those emails. I'll also send a post webinar email. And thank you guys so much. Thank you, Hayden, and thank you, Alfonso. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
You're welcome. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. All right. So I'll be closing the sharing screen, and I'll be ending the webinar soon. But thank you guys. Have a great night.
Okay, did that email go through?
Yes, it did.
Okay, great.
All right.